Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital with power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital. We are a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share our knowledge, power, and connections. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can at www.togetherindigital.com. And I'm really excited to introduce all of you this week to Kelly Ferraro. She's a digital leader, coach, consultant with over 16 years of experience for working for some of the largest brands. Maybe you've heard of them: Facebook, Ogilvy, Diageo, to name a few. She is currently the head of growth at Home Team and a global content film production company with over 500 filmmakers worldwide, who just wrapped NBC's America's Song Contest and 3 seasons of one of my favorites at NBC, The Voice. She cut her teeth in digital marketing and advertising, and most recently, she leads a team of solution consultants at Facebook, delivering over $1 billion with a B dollars in revenue across 1,000 advertising agencies. In her career, she has led high-performance teams and fast-scaling companies to success through her ability to set a bold vision, lean into each player's strengths, and inspire co-creation and the realization of big ideas. During the pandemic, Kelly found herself unsatisfied with working motherhood, welcome to the club, in the corporate context, and left her career at Facebook to step out on her own to start her own coaching company and consulting. She currently coaches mothers seeking work-life balance and works with clients on a contract basis. Kelly holds a BA from Rutgers College, a JD from Catholic University Certifications and Strategy from Columbia Business School of Business School. It's Friday. And leaders coaching from Lightyear Leadership. She is a wife and mother of 2 young children, Liam, love that name, 5, and Evie, 4, and is a fitness and movement enthusiast and currently resides in Austin, Texas. Awesome to have you here with us, Kelly. I know it's so fun to have your bio read, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, as you're reading it, my heart is sort of palpitating and I'm like, who is that? And I don't know if I want to get a beer with that person until the part where she quit.
Right.
It was like, oh, this is too much, because it was too much. And when I hear all that, I'm like, oh my God, that is so much. And at the same time, I suffer from imposter syndrome. So the fact that I'm even sitting here with you today, I feel so humbled and honored. And am I even worthy of this seat, knowing that, like, just, the last episode was with Eric Ballard, who's such incredible. I mean, how do I follow that? Sorry, people. I don't know.
You show up and you be you. I think, and it's first of all, thank you for being so open and honest about how you truly feel about being a guest that comes on. You are probably, we've done over 100 shows now of this technically. We're at like 14, 15 with the episodes of the podcast. 90% of the women, maybe more, share that same thing, that same thought, that same feeling. And I think it is really curious, and I'm excited to see how it plays out in our conversation today with you and with our live audience that's listening. Just how much of a I'm going to go ahead and just, you're like earlier, can I cuss? How much of a mindfuck success can be, because you strive for it, right? You push for it, you work hard for it, you get to the point where you have a bio that sounds and reads like yours, and then you go, wait, this is supposed to be success?
That's not me. That's not me. Right? Yeah. And a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, I heard it's probably a graduation speech that Jim Carrey gave. And he said something that really stuck with me, which is like, we spend our lives putting this avatar of ourselves out into the world. And then at some point we just go, that isn't me. That isn't me. And it's that dissonance and that I think that's so interesting. And where does that come from? And why do we do that? And who told us to do that? And I can think of so many moments in my life where I felt that that dissonance in my body to the point of wanting to cry and going, who am I? What am I doing? What is this success thing what is this ladder I'm climbing? Like it, I just want a simple life. And I would dream of running away to like the beach, living in a hut, like, cause this all just sounds like too much.
Yep. Yeah. I'm like, I was all Henry David Thoreau. I'm going to go live out in the middle of the woods in a hut. So yes, although beachside does sound nice. So what was like that? Can you recall? I mean, maybe you can't, but I was just curious, like, what was your mindset? What was the moment? What was the instance in which you kind of just realized, oh, wow, this is all a bunch of BS and I need to make a change?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many ways I can go with it. Like there's the context of my career, there's different moments I can remember. And I would like to share context, but yeah. Is it okay if I share a little context?
Of course.
Okay. So context. So I can think of really distinct moments and I'll get to those, but I think the context is after college, I worked in this really high-paced Washington, D.C. consultancy where there was two women on staff among a bunch of men in power suits. They all were ex-Clinton White House office officios. And there was one of the women was further along in her career and just radiated peace. And if she were a sound, it would be the sound of like orchids growing.
It's amazing.
Oh, and she was insightful and she'd write these amazing debriefs and beautiful and poetic. And then the working mom with the young kids who had to, this is the time when people had offices with clear windows and it wasn't the open office structure. So she would paste all the folders over and she'd be like pumping and coming in and rushing around. Like her sound would be like, click, 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 fuck. Click, fuck. And that was a mentor for me, right? Like this is a woman who is well educated and decorated and is doing the thing among the men. And she's a world renowned, like leader in the field that she's in and travels around the world globally and wears the Chanel and has the accolades, all the things. And that's what I had in front of me. And I was like, I don't think I can do that. And I don't know if it was like, I can't do that, right? Like I'm not capable, right? I don't know. Or if it was, I don't want to, but it was a bodily experience. That's success, right? And I'm like a low-level executive assistant. I'm just like typing briefs and getting meetings and like crying at the right hotel for my boss, hiding in the bathroom. Like the pressure was real. And I felt it and I felt the pressure she was under, even though working motherhood was farther into my future. It was still, almost 15 years in my future at that point. But that was the road that I was looking at. And I was like, oh man, this ain't it.
You're like, so this is success. What? Somebody lied to me. That is interesting. And it is fascinating too. And I was going to ask you this too, a little bit for even more context, maybe. I'm kind of curious as to where you derive this idea of what success is and looks like.
I mean, how far back do we go? I think, everyone has something that happened to them when they were in like second or third grade, whatever that is. First, second, third grade, we all have these experiences, and whatever like our, a moment was, whatever things are stuck to us, you go down the tree of your life, and often that's the root, and something happened. You were exposed to a belief that we held on to. And I think for me, it was like first grade. I didn't get into the top reading group. I was in the middle one. I think the top one was like the Snoopies. I was in Charlie Brown's, the Woodstocks.
Oh,
harsh, right? Like you're a bird. If you were in the Woodstocks, like you're just the little yellow sidekick bird. Yeah, that sucks. So I didn't get in, and my parents were both public school teachers. And by the way, conservative, Republican, love you, mom and dad, still love you. Even though you still are. And I felt like a failure, and I would talk all the time and get my name on the board and get like sent to the principal.
Oh, yeah.
So like I'm in this middle reading group and my name is on the board and my parents are like cringing about this. And so I had to go home and practice flashcards and just learn. And then my mom started getting me more books. And I worked my way up to that top Snoopy reading group. And it was like I had my parents' admiration, love, and success. And I think that's maybe when I equated like love and acceptance, success. Again,
Absolutely.
I love you, mom and dad, but that shit is traumatizing.
It is. So true. It is. You're 100% right. I mean, and it's the stigma in which a lot of us, who grew up in the late 80s and maybe early 90s definitely felt. But that's a great insight. So you go from striving for the Snoopy group, right? And then now you're witnessing and seeing this working woman who's, for all intents and purposes, a success, but then realizing, success isn't all it's really cracked up to be. So you kind of saw that early on in your career, but then you kept going, like you kept pushing and doing amazing things. So what was it?
I didn't get the lesson. I didn't get the memo.
You're like, that won't be me. It's rough for her, but I'll be able to do all of this.
Why didn't I get the memo? Because it's addicting. And its success is really addictive. And there is a frontal lobe part of our brain, right, where dopamine fires off. And I think that you have to recognize when it's endorphins and good flow versus dopamine. And as I got a little bit older, I love to surf and man, what a good kind of high, right? What a great high. And I love to ski and what a great high. And somewhere in that, I found gymnastics because I was too tall for it. It was weird, but physical movement is an important part of me. And so I'm sharing some of this element in this background. And then I became a high jumper sort of randomly. A track coach recruited me and I got to jump over bars and feel this really cool flow. And it was just me and the bar. And also like, what an analogy for success, right? Like the bar gets higher and like literally if you don't meet the height, you fall and the bar collapses. You can like land on it in the back of on your back. Like I still have low back issues to this day. So for years I did that. And I got a lot of trophies for it. And it was like the next big moment of like, oh, you can get all this recognition and trophies and scores on the board. And our track team would get all these points and win meets. And so this kind of success addiction just went on for me for a really long time. And I just found ways to transfer it. Right. Like I knew I wasn't going to be an Olympic athlete. So then it went into academia and academia became working became then law school and, law school became more working and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And at the same time, there was just always this duality, maybe because I'm a Pisces, I don't know. So I've always felt this duality of like that surfer finding flow and recognizing when it's the good dopamine, the good endorphins versus the success dopamine and always feeling at odds with myself in that duality.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that your self-awareness about those things in the past, as well as like chasing certain types of, success highs is kind of like it's such a easy pattern for people to see, but maybe hard for you to sort of spot. I myself am, speaking of all things success, I'm very much not a fan of promoting success without strife. I think even though it was probably hard and you didn't quite see what was going on with that working mom at a young age, but I have always valued my mentors who have really kind of shown me the really reals of what they've overcome and accomplished. So if you don't mind me asking, outside of the accolades and the accomplishments that you achieved during your time at Facebook and other companies, in general, what were some of those harder things that you had to overcome in order to, earn those degrees, get those accolades and awards?
Oh gosh, so much. I'm thinking, I'm taking a moment because there's a lot of ways I can answer this question. I'm just kind of using my inner listening for a second on the question. So you want to hear like the story of the struggle behind the accolades, and I have a lot of those. And so let me think back. Law school was one, right? Like I just remember My memories of law school were having to sit and study for long periods of time, and recognizing that that wasn't me, and being a C student out of the gates and having to work really hard to just eke by with some B's. And in law school, that's like failing. And so I remember having so much anxiety, but I didn't know it was anxiety at the time because we didn't talk about mental health. I just knew that I was running a lot to deal with my emotions, and maybe numbing, right?
Yeah.
Like I was doing things to numb, and I wasn't sleeping. And
Yeah.
I knew that I couldn't breathe.
Mm.
I knew I couldn't breathe. And I went through that experience, and I pushed my body through it against its own will.
Mhm.
And when I got to the end, the economy tanked. This was like the Great Recession of 2008, the mortgage crisis, right? So there weren't a lot of jobs at the time. And I was working in a law firm that hired me without a bar. I wasn't licensed yet. And I never got licensed. Actually, I left very quickly. I had a very short stint in law.
Yeah.
So what was going on the other side of that? On paper at the time, it looked like I was a success. I graduated law school. I had a job in an economy where people didn't have the jobs. And I was sitting in this gray office. It was dark, and I had to negotiate with these male insurance adjusters who talked down to me. Oh, sweetie. I would get them though. I would get them for every single dollar.
Nice.
I would not settle. I would wait it out till I got my clients everything that they could get from those insurance adjusters. And I just remember just having all these paper cuts on my hands and looking at the other lawyers, and I would be like, what's next? What's next? Because, at this point, I was in my early 20s. I, did all the things that were successful. I went to college. I got the law degree. I ran a marathon or two and did all the stuff. I was on my way to maybe getting married. I had a boyfriend. We would buy all the it was all there. And I knew I was really unhappy, and my world felt gray. And weird stuff started to happen. So like, I remember like maybe it was reading too many personal injury cases at the time, but I would be like in my kitchen preparing food and imagine all the ways the knife was going to cut me, or driving and thinking of all the ways that like maybe we would get into a car accident. And so I don't know if that was anxiety, stress, or my body just saying like, you're in the wrong thing. I was working in personal injury law.
I can see how that might haunt a person in a number of ways.
Yeah. And so behind the scenes, I realized I was unhappy and that I needed to just like do something. And so I started taking the manila file folders from the office and hiding my gym clothes under them. And then I would go into the file room and act like I was filing, and then sneak out the fire exit and go to this and like
Nice.
play hooky for my lawyer life.
Yeah.
And I did that for a little while. And then this fitness store opened up in my neighborhood, and my boyfriend, who's now my husband, at the time, he was like, there's this store, it has this like Omega thing, like you should go check it out. It seems like you. And I walk in, and it was like they were playing Lady Gaga, and everything was hot pink, and the women were peppy. And I'm like, what is this? I just came from this gray world where I have to wear a suit and hide my workout clothes behind a manila folder. And it was a Lululemon that had like just opened up in my neighborhood. And I was living in Logan Circle in Washington, D.C. at the time. And yeah, so I wasn't expecting to go here with this story, but I think it's just like behind the scenes, I was unhappy and I was trying to escape my own life, and I was seeking color.
Yeah.
I was seeking color in this world that felt so gray and dull and full of paper cuts and limitations. And all of a sudden, when I stepped into Lululemon and met the staff, I saw possibility. And I didn't know what that was, but I wanted more. And I kept going back, and I'd go to their free yoga classes. And then one day I went to the Sunday yoga class, and afterwards this 5'10" gazelle came in with blonde hair and blue eyes, Carolyn Manning. She was the regional manager at the time. She's like, what are your goals? in life. And I thought, what are my goals? Like, haven't I hit them all? I'm 24.
Yeah.
I sneak out in the middle of the day to get my endorphins on. And lo and behold, it turned out she was a graduate of my same law school. And she had quit her life to go work for Lululemon. And I quickly followed in her footsteps, and I quit law. This is back in 2009.
Uh-huh.
So I quit and I just started selling yoga pants and hawking yoga pants for $12 an hour, oftentimes to my law school peers.
Right. Not awkward. But can I ask you though, like, how much better did you feel when you made that change?
So much better, so much better. And what I learned from that experience, so actually this is an important part of my story. At that point, so Chip Wilson was the CEO of Lululemon, and his sister-in-law, Suzanne Conrad, was the director of possibility for the company. And the company at the time did almost no marketing. This is before, by the way, they didn't even have a website yet. Like an e-commerce was new. This is back in 2009, y'all, right? I remember we did this whole "you could shop naked" promotion. Wow. And so this is like the beginning of e-commerce. And they only did 2 ads a month, 1 print ad in Runner's World and 1 print ad in Yoga Journal. So everything was done through word of mouth and through employee development and goal coaching. And so as an employee, I was exposed to Suzanne Conrad's, it's now called Lightyear, lightyear.co, her body of work, which really influenced my life, because it was the first time that I had this bigger question posed to me of like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? What's a vision you have for your life? What are your big goals in life? And everything until that point had just been this ladder where I was creating the next rung on the ladder from the position that I was standing in today. Mm-hmm. And what I learned from that body of work was that actually, to propel yourself into a different position, you need to start from the future, because it breaks some of those synapses in the brain that are so hardwired for the now. It breaks out of it, and you have to work backwards from there. And what you'll find is that you'll probably get to that vision a lot faster than 10 years. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know, but that's what's going on.
No, absolutely. I think it's all really wonderful and relatable, because as you're sharing your story, and I'm sure for those who are listening, live and on the podcast, you have that sense of deja vu or reminiscence of like, oh yeah, I remember taking a few contract jobs and sitting in offices and looking around and going, what the hell am I doing here? It was like the way that they insisted that I dress, or the etiquette of the office, the way that people talked to and treated each other. I think a lot of us sitting and listening have kind of been in that space. And I think another thing that I think it was important that you mentioned is numbing. One thing I learned recently is that working is a form of numbing for me as well, which kind of just doubles down on the impact of the fact that if you're striving for success all the time, and the way that you avoid the fact that you are feeling a little like dead inside, you just numb by doing more work still, which is a great, way to kind of climb the ladder, but then you're going to get completely burnt out, fried, and be ready to just, light the world on fire in some fashion. And then another thing I wanted to bring up was this notion with success of hedonic adaptation. There was something in there that you said that kind of reminded me of that, where it's like, more will never be enough. It's like literally the way our brains are hardwired. As soon as we achieve something or we get something, it's always what's next, And I've even started talking about this with my kids. I want this toy. I want this toy. I was like, I will get you that toy. And in 3 days tops, you will forget about that toy and already be moving on to the next one. And it happens to us as adults, you're just like striving and saving and wanting like this certain car. And then the first few months you're in it, you're like, I made it. I'm in my car. I'm in my Tesla, whatever that looks like. I don't know. And then it just becomes a car. It's just a car. And you're like, is there a new model out? Is there a better car I could get? And so it's one of those things, I wanted to get to the question, not just about perceived success and like the pitfalls of success, but specifically for women. how are we being set up to fail, or worse, become unhappy and unfulfilled? Because I would rather fail than be unhappy and fulfilled personally, with what we see and perceive as success.
Gosh, there's so much in what you just said. First, that part about, I want to go back and yes, the part about the want and the numbing. Oh,
Mm,
wow. I think those are just the opposite sides of the same coin. I think they're absolutely related. The
mhm,
wanting and the numbing. And there is this like phenomenon of, the golden handcuffs in the
mm,
corporate world,
mhm,
where the thing that binds you to it, the victimization, is the victims of our own wanting, and then the victims of our own success. And so we're there, but we got to get the next title, and we got to get the bigger paycheck, because now we have the house, but we have to build the pool. And I remember sitting around and just thinking, like, everyone around me, this is all we're talking about. This is all we're
mhm,
talking about. And this is the conversation. And nobody's really living their dream here. Nobody's actually like doing what they want to do. We're just justifying it because we can buy all this shit that we want. And the more
mhm.
we want, the more we're stuck there, the more we have to stay in these, living someone else's dream. I mean, I was making Mark Zuckerberg rich
Yeah.
and richer, and Sheryl Sandberg, God love you for option B, and sort of for lean in. Like, like it's so, at the end of the day, is that what my life is about? Is that what I'm here to do on this earth? And I ask myself those questions. So yeah, the wanting and the wanting and the numbing. I could talk forever about that. I also want to back up, and I think that there's some important context that I'm hearing to add, because everybody has a story, and we talked a lot about, like, well, I'm going to call it the behind the scenes, right? There's the highlights reel of what we're doing, and there's the
Yeah.
behind the scenes. And now that I work in a film company, it's it's even more prescient. So there's this avatar, this image we put of ourselves out into the world. And I think for so long, we were taught by um, a lot, culture. And if we're all working in digital, I'm going to make it relevant to what we're doing. If you think about how we started, like when I started in digital, it was 2009, 2010. And brands weren't even allowed on Facebook yet, really, at that
Yeah.
time. So Facebook had just opened up to brands. We weren't advertising on Facebook until about 2013. And so we had this period between about 2010, 2013, where a lot of us were coming to digital. It was new. I was allowed to, I didn't know anything about it. I was a lawyer, a failed lawyer, working at Lululemon. I was a total hack, and they took me. So, we were figuring it all out. And some of the innovations around us were like the iPhone had turned on the camera to the selfie around 2010. Brands were finally up and running, and on Facebook, they were allowed in around 2009, 2010. So we had more than just Twitter. And we had these community managers that were these like hybrid role of like customer support and feedback and content creators. And they were talking to these influencers. Oh my God, the influencers. The influencers. So we used to search for, I worked at Ogilvy, and we would literally like research influencers and be like, and how many followers do they have, and how many retweets, and who else follows them, and what's their power number for this and their influence number, and score them and give them to brands. In the beginning, they were like happy to do it for a free meal or a trip. But then by 2012, I mean, we're talking six figures for a post.
Yeah.
And billions of dollars shifted from traditional advertising, so scripted commercials, traditional advertising, over to these people who were literally paid to create these avatars of themselves and put this notion of perfectionism out into the world. And at the same exact time, this selfie camera had happened. And so we were now in front of the camera. And what did we have to look at?
Gosh.
Influencers.
Yes. There's so much to unpack about the selfie society. It's so true. I think the selfie is like is a big part of the demise of like of how we continue to perceive and see ourselves. Because I had this in one of the questions too. It's like, if in this insta perfect influencer polished accomplished life, you're just basically trying to constantly scream, I'm okay, when you're not. When you're not.
Okay. And in many ways, my first Instagram post, I don't even know when it was, 2000. 11. And I think it was like, I didn't know how to Instagram, and it was like my dirty Le Creuset with like a leftover clam in it. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I didn't turn the camera on myself for a long time. But then when I did, I was equally guilty of it. And so, from 2011 till about 2015, I probably went through 4 years of like, here's my Insta perfect. And in that time period, I moved to New York. So I had a great backdrop for this avatar that I was creating in the world. And then, and this is an important part of the story, then in April 2015, I was 38 weeks pregnant. And with 2 weeks left in my pregnancy, I suddenly lost my baby. And everything leading up to that moment on social media had looked so picture perfect. And then it was just silence, right? And so I wasn't going to share a picture of that, obviously, on social media, but there was so much going on behind the scenes that took me about 2 months to come out with. Yeah. And I felt like, people saw me 9 months pregnant and there was no baby pictures, and babies don't bake for 11 months. So they're going to do the math. Like I'm going to be found out. So I need to come clean on what had happened and talk about grief on social media and talk about the behind the scenes in a space that's all about the highlights reel.
Yeah.
And I want to keep this light, right? Like still.
No. I mean, and I think that's, and I do see that. I don't mean to be like an uber pessimist. I do think that, there are people who are leveraging social media now for the right reasons to have, the kinds of conversations, and hopefully in a safe and constructive manner, with others about what they're experiencing, so that others don't feel like they're quite alone. I think just having young kids myself, and whenever they get online at all or they watch YouTube influencers, it just really, it irks me, because it's like they're not seeing the really real of people, like you called it. It's like, it's just an avatar. And I don't want them to feel as if they need to change anything about who they are. I want them to just be themselves in an imperfect world, in their most imperfect way, that's, truest to themselves. And if you don't see that model, that behavior being modeled, never mind our peers, but those kids that are around us, whether you're an aunt, an uncle, a godparent, whatever, they're not going to be able to feel that sense of freedom and ability if you're just perpetuating it. So yeah, I mean, and maybe it's just because I don't like doing selfies of myself. I'll take selfies of myself with my kids. That's about the extent of it. Because I'm like, oh, I want to be in a picture with my kids. Yeah. But I never want to, I will do a few selfies a year, but not very many. Yeah. But enough about my obsession like of selfies. And sorry, anybody who's listening who loves doing their selfies. If you do selfies out of self-love, then more power to you, friends. Yeah. Do it.
I'm sure there are even people who walk around that just know they're awesome and tell themselves they're awesome and take selfies all day. And I have no judgment. I want to learn from those people.
100%.
You got something that I don't
take. So what are some questions for those of you who are listening right now and kind of, maybe feeling some in aligning yourself with some of the experiences that Kelly's being so gracious and sharing and vulnerable and sharing? Kelly, for your clients as a coach, what are some of the things, or what are some of the questions that you help your clients begin to ask themselves to start to define success for themselves? Because this is the hard thing, right? Is like from such a young age, we are told what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's success, what's not. It's really hard to stop, like, realizing, we've said this a few times in some of our past interviews, whose should is this? I should be married. I should have a college degree. It's like, whose should is it? How do we begin? Like, how do you start to break through all of that? Because that's a lot to break through. It's a lot of BS.
So much BS to break through. Well, first, I just want to land one other just kind of like thread in that last story, which is, everybody has a behind the scenes, right? Like everybody has the hard thing that they're dealing with on their path to success. And so people look successful. We look at other people and we don't always know the story, but it's there. And in this time when I was grappling with that and wondering if I could still be a successful person, I felt like I had this like red mark on me, this tragedy, this black ball. I remember taking a yoga class maybe a year or so later, a couple of years later, and I heard the teacher ended with this Rebecca Campbell quote and said, "Bless the thing that broke me and cracked me open, for the world needed me open." I love that quote. You heard it?
That's so good.
It's so
Say it
good.
again.
Bless the thing that broke me and cracked me wide open, for the world needed me open. And that's Rebecca Campbell.
Joe, write that down. Some good stuff right there. That's
It's
great.
good stuff right there. And I think it was like, oh, it's that's where the good stuff is. That's where the connection happens. It's not at the top of the mountain, it's in the valley. When we think we're in the shit, that's where the life and the changing and the growth and the story about who we are. It's not when we're standing on that perception of success that was built by men. It was built by a world that wasn't for us. It's a triangle. And man, my arms are tired from climbing that mountain, and triangles are sharp. And this isn't fun, because the softness and the vulnerability and the rawness of life, like that's where all the good shit happens. So I just want to say that. And so I think everybody has something, and it's recognizing that. And so people who I've coached, I mean, oftentimes it's moms who are burnt out, right? And I'm not like, and here's the 5-step program, and don't worry, because you won't be burnt out. Just get my book or read my thing. Like, God bless those people too. It's a process and it's a journey. And I think it starts with so much questions. Okay. What are my values? And how far away am I right now from living those values? The first time I asked myself that was when I was in that initial Lululemon goal coaching under Suzanne Conrad's, wisdom. And I had discovered or stumbled into this something called the Circle of Life, the Wheel of Life, from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. Yeah, it's great. And the Circle of Life is this, essentially it's a circle, and you have these pie slices. And then for each line of the slice, you write a different one of your values. And then you draw a dot, and it's concentric. So it starts in the middle. And how much are you living that value or not? And if you're not really living that value, you put it closer to the center of the circle. If you are living that value, you put it on the circumference on the outside of the circle. And when you're done, what happened was most of us at this point had really skewed heavily towards career. And there's other versions of this. I just saw one from a coach, Julie Santiago, who had this circle. It was like 80% of your life is work and 50% is the actual better. And I was like, 50% still sounds like a lot. It's still a lot, right? To focus on work with. And so when you define your values and you think about success as a circle, then you can start to take what you want in your life and put it in a circle. And that was really game changing for me. And I for those listening on the podcast, if you're accessing this through LinkedIn, I'll share it. I'll make sure that there's an access to it. But I'm holding up right now an image of what I'm calling my want circle. And this is my version of it, but the Institute for Integrative Nutrition has their version. Suzanne Conrad and Lightyear have their version, where you write what you don't want on the outside. But what I did was I started to just write the things that I wanted and give them their own circle inside, and a color that felt like the right energy and vibration for that. And the things I wrote in here weren't the things that I was ever raised to aspire to by society and culture and corporate America. It's like, I want integrated motherhood. I want to be integrated for motherhood, because I don't feel that way right now. Sometimes I feel like I'm a mother between these hours and the margins of life, and a career here and a wife here and myself here. And I wanted a joyful, peaceful home. I wanted that so badly. I would have gone to the jungles of Costa Rica and done ayahuasca and purged myself of bad energy to get that a year ago. I wanted that so badly. I wanted to write. I wanted good money energy, business ownership, to be a coach, to host retreats. I wanted daily movement as spiritual practice. And I wanted sobriety, because I knew that I was using alcohol to numb. And I knew that I was waiting for that 5 o'clock drink, because life had just felt so hard and so bad. And I was so burnt out. And so when I thought of success as a circle and looked at my values, it felt like I could breathe in my body Like even talking about this feels so much better than hearing that bio that you read. Like, because that bio, I felt a triangle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's an interesting insight too, like looking at your past accomplishments, accolades, successes, and when you hear them played back to you, how do they feel in your body? Does it make you tense up and kind of cringe? Well, that's telling you something. If it makes you like light up and feel proud and like puff out your chest, that's telling you something. And I also think going back too to sort of like pre-pubescent you, I did this recently with another member who was like, I'm just kind of at a loss. I know I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I know I want a different kind of job. And one of the first questions I asked her was like, what did you love to do as a kid? Before you gave any shits about what the rest of the world thought about you, or, and the sky was the limit, right? When you're a kid, you can kind of just do anything because you don't understand the barriers. And she was like, oh, I love writing.
Yeah.
And so now she's going back and she actually landed a job as a copywriter and she's doing the thing that she loves. I think, and I do highly recommend and agree with you, outside of kind of going backwards and looking at childhood and looking at your current successes, I'm using air quotes there, and really feeling how they feel, to start to identify where your values are lying, right? Because then maybe you start to shine or feel pride when you hear about the types of teams that you've built. Maybe you're meant to be somebody that does a lot of team building, where do you feel that sense of pride? But then also that wheel of life, I agree. We've actually worked that into our goal getters workshop that we do on a quarterly basis for Together Digital. And it was 100% that thing, Kelly, where all of us shared ours and everybody was maxing out on career. And then everything else in our life, environment, family, friends, health, wellness, was all kind of like all over the place. So I agree. The wheel of life is a great tool to start to help you begin to identify what are some values that you need to react to. And once you kind of put how fulfilled you feel or how much time you're spending, you'll start to be like, that is one wonky ass wheel I got going on there. It's like all spiked in one direction and I want more of this stuff, but I'm spending all my time here. Well, wait a second. That is a great, great start to help people start to, ask those deeper questions and start to hopefully make some changes. Does anybody else? I mean, we have our live audience. I have a couple more questions, but I want to make sure too we have time for them to ask. Another question that I had for you, outside of, beginning to define success for yourself, it's never going to be, like you said, all up. Like even once you have your values and your questions, everything in your want circle, you might not have anything at all in your want circle right now, and it's all aspirational. What are the things that keep you going when you start to feel like you're falling short?
Oh, I love this question. This is a hard. So I have to say, there's these like habits and practices that I have, and then there's the in the moment answer, and I think both. And so I think the question is like, if I feel like I'm falling short, what keeps me going? And a way that in light year we would say it's like going below the line. When you're below the line on something, it's like the shaming, the self-doubt, worry, fear, all those things that creep in. And yeah. And I think on a regular basis, for me, having my definition of a spiritual practice, and for me, a spiritual practice is I read Mark Nepo's The Book of Awakening every morning, just one little passage. And actually, one line from today's is so relevant. And it's so funny because every time I open it, it's like, this is the exact lesson. Sometimes it's really random. He's a cancer survivor and I can't personally relate to that. Sometimes I do have tragedy in my life. So, but there's some things that I'm like, oh, this is like exactly what the lesson was that I need today. And so this one says, the Shinto sage from the hills of Japan affirms that we all know in our hearts, but affirms what we all know in our hearts, but seldom honor. I have worked hard to give up attaining a place ordained by others in the world. For this always leads me into noise, confusion, and gruffness. Often it is some grief or pain that halts me, jars me into remembering the exercise of gentleness that opens up the quiet world.
I love it. That's beautiful. I'm such a massive nerd on anything and all things mindfulness. And I absolutely agree with you. I think especially with the pandemic, and having kind of our whole community and our experiences, how we come together, being completely ripped out from underneath us all, plus working from home with two small children, it just needed something. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Finding some sort of spiritual practice, whatever works best for you, is absolutely tremendous. Walking meditations, meditation in general, has definitely helped. I've even done a workshop for a few organizations talking about how mindfulness can help with burnout. And one of my favorite basic philosophies of mindfulness is non-attachment. And it's not even non-attachment in the sense of attachment to the material, it's attachment to outcome. How
Yeah.
many times have you walked into a big day, like your wedding or an event or a certain life stage or phase or experience with a certain expectation? And there's something about letting go of that expectation for yourself and for everything else, and just walk in and know what is going to happen is meant to happen. And it allows you to be, one, present and in the moment, and two, you're kind of never disappointed. I know it doesn't sound like too like blah or depressing, but it really is quite freeing knowing that you can put together this map of wants for yourselves. And as you are doing this, ladies, I'm speaking to all of you because I know we're going to fall into this trap of, we're going to create these wants. And one, we're going to want it to be and look as pretty as Kelly's was. And two, we're going to make sure that we somehow get all of those, because again, that's how we are conditioned. But just as you're pursuing those wants, just really focus on the journey, learn from the journey, and don't just lean so heavy on what the desired outcome, or making it the perfect outcome. That was huge for me. That saved me a lot of stress, a lot of worry in the last few years. If I had sleepless nights, I'm like, I have done everything to take care of now. Tomorrow will have to take care of itself. It's just kind of that one day at a time. I think that also really helps, because I think another thing that I love about this conversation with you, Kelly, has been that we're starting to kind of bust down that idea of hustle. This idea that hustle is the only way to succeed. And I think, while you've achieved a lot of success, I think with what you're doing now, you're achieving more success and a whole hell of a lot more purpose. And for anybody that's like, I don't know, I'm just not happy, I'm not fulfilled at work. If you do the exercise that Kelly just outlined for you, pretty sure you'll start to see why.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. I do feel more successful yes. Yes. And making less money. It's all good. It's all,
Right?
and
Right?
yeah. And there's something else too that you were saying about the presence piece of it. So the other part of the question of like, what do I do? It's not just like, oh, I meditate and then I'm just fine. It's like, I
Right.
actually have to be present in the moment when I'm doing the falling short thing. And I have a story I like to tell, and I don't want to get too, it's called Donut Line Buddhism. And when my son was in school, it was a ritual where every Friday I would take him to the Vietnamese donut shop on the way and we'd get a donut. And leading up to Halloween, the Friday before Halloween, I promised both kids I would take them. So leave early, do the drop off, hit the marks. And this is always a stressful thing, by the way. Like, this is the morning hustle thing. This is like why remote work is awesome for the most part, because you don't have to also be dressed and look good and go to an office.
Right.
I could like be in my PJs still, but there's still that stress of getting all the kids to school on time. And so that's in the background. And we go to the donut shop, and because it's the Friday before Halloween, the line is like out the door. And I promised my kids donuts. So there's no way I cannot do this. And it's the good Halloween colored sprinkles, purple, green, white, orange on top of the chocolate one. And I'm doing the thing in my head of like, oh my God, I'm falling short. I'm not going to hit the marks. And it's like this chicken with its head cut off kind of voice, like, you're falling short, you're going to be late. And then this like mommy voice comes in, like, you're failing as a mother. Like, you're not going to get the donuts and get your kids to school on time. And I just remember in that moment, like tapping, like huffing and tapping and like, and like noticing what I was doing and how I'm responding to that self-shaming inner critic bitch. And where it's coming from. And so it's like, the great secret here is this amazing hard tool. It's called stop it. Stop,
Just
stop
knock
it.
it off.
I don't mean like, oh, it's so easy, just stop. No, like stop it, literally stop it. And when I stopped it and I looked around, I saw a construction worker online in front of me buying dozens of donuts for the crews that were going to go build in the Texas heat all day. I saw nurses with their hospital tags on buying Halloween donuts for the nursing staff. I saw teachers and I'm like, oh, you suck. You're just this like privileged white lady making donuts for your kids, huffing your foot like we're going to be late. Check yourself, man, like check yourself. And I did, and it was okay. And I breathed and we got the donuts and my son got to school on time. And then we went back to the donut shop with my daughter to buy donuts for her teachers because I was inspired by the people who were there in
that's
the
awesome.
moment, doing the right thing.
Yes.
That was about shifting, right? So stop projecting, stop it. What's the expose that incorrect belief? This is also from Lightyear. I want to quote my teacher, Suzanne Conrad here. Expose that incorrect belief that perfect with a capital P. Don't confuse perfect with perfectionism. All perfect and the cracks make us perfect and the vulnerability and the mistakes and all that shit makes us way better.
Right.
As I know we have to leave time for questions. I don't want to talk too much, but and then you get committed, like you clarify that commitment. And my commitment is like, okay, in that if I'm going to be an integrated mother and I want a joyful, peaceful home, right? And I want to be a spiritual person and I want, community and friendship and all these things in my life. I can't be the bitch on the donut line.
As not on brand.
Not on brand. That's what I want in my life.
I 100% relate to that story. And I'm so glad that you shared because it's so small, but it's so true how just a little bit of a perception shift and mindset and being mindful can really change your experience. Like how you experience the world and how the world experiences you. Because once you start to be self-aware of kind of being in your own head and having the ideals and being attached to the outcome, when you stop and you do slow down, it's like you're starting to see like somebody took off the blinders and you're looking around and you're like, oh, there's all this other stuff around me. And now sometimes I'll go places and it almost makes me too anxious now because I'm very much an empath. I saw your equivalent of you in years past at the Starbucks and she was like hovering over the counter. She wanted her coffee made exactly a specific way. She was literally like as far as she could get over the counter to try to see what the guy was doing. And she was like, no. And I was like, oh, I think I might just have to go step outside and come back in when she is gone because you could just feel her tension and feel her energy. And I'm like, damn it, if you're that picky about your coffee, make it at home, it just like, and the poor guy that was working there, he was just like sweating bullets. He's like, is this okay? Is this okay? What if I do that? Like you'd see he was like second guessing himself when before that he was making like 10 coffees at once. And for this one coffee, he almost couldn't take it. So yeah, I mean, it's not just about what's happening inside. It's like, what are you doing to the rest of the world around you? What are you modeling for your children? What are you modeling for those who are trying to help and serve you when you are striving for that perfectionism?
Yeah, I bet that woman has an amazing resume.
I'm sure she does. I mean, she was like dressed so fabulously, perfectly coiffed hair, amazing nails.
Louis Vuitton. She had Louis Vuittons,
Yeah.
Which is, and to put a pin on that topic, like it's not about getting to the top of the mountain. It's not even about finding your one sole purpose in life, because man, that's a lot of pressure. The success that needs the rebrand is that it's exactly what you said. It's how do I show up on the Starbucks line? How am I showing up in this world in service of my legacy? And let's not wait for that legacy to be my eulogy. Let's have it be today. And that is success. And it is a constant practice. And I'm always falling short. This is a lifelong journey of unlearning and relearning. I'm always going to fall short of that. But if I remember that I have the capital P, perfection is, perfect, not perfectionism. Again, quoting my teacher, Suzanne Conrad, then I can breathe into that and go, okay, I can try again tomorrow. I yell at my kids sometimes, man, am I a shitty mom? No, I'm a mom.
Right.
And I'm trying and I'm struggling. And, you know,
Yeah.
this for any woman out there who's telling herself she's falling short, I think it's knowing what you want and then give yourself the gift of grace as you continually try to get there. And when I think about the most successful woman in the world, she never had a resume. It's my
Mhm.
grandmother who is almost 90. I think she just turned 98. And she woke up and she cooked food and she sang and she would tend to the sunflowers in her garden. And she's living that legacy of joy and peace and love
Yeah.
every day. And it's so much simpler
Yeah.
than we need it.
So much easier than we realize. Kelly, this has been great. You've given me, and I'm sure everyone who's listening, a lot to just think about and consider. I love having these on Fridays because I hope it helps you all kind of go into the weekend. You go back, you look at your notes, maybe you listen to the playback, check out the podcast, and just let it sit with you. Because it's, again, we're working up against systems, a society, and conditioning that have been surrounding us our whole entire lives. And success does not have to be the definition that everyone has created for you. It's how you define it. And I think when you look at your grandmother and that's how you're defining it, that's so beautiful. And things that you mentioned at the end of the day, when we're all at the end of our days, that's what you want to remember. So thank you so much, Kelly, for being so brave and sharing all of your experiences and your wisdom and your learnings from your amazing teachers. We're at the hour. So thank you all. If you want to reach out to Kelly, you can on LinkedIn. You can also find her in Slack members. She's in there with us as well. And then Kelly, you should totally join our Working Moms Slack group. If you ever need anything, a space to share, ask questions, vent, it's also a great place. So
I bet they're one and the same. I could copy and paste.
social yelling. Yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. It was fabulous. Everyone, take care. Have a great, great weekend.
Amy, you're such a joy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this, holding this space for women to share their stories and connect. It's so valuable. And thank you for letting me share mine. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Everyone, have a great weekend. Bye.